I was thinking about what I should do for a giveaway this time, and I'm going to be giving away one of my leather flat caps. So in order to win this, you need to like my newest 2 videos and comment on one of them. Make sure you're subscribed to my channel so that when I post a video saying who won this, it'll probably be in another one of my videos. You'll get an alert. So here's another one of my videos, a little bit different this time. If you're in the north, snowshoe straps. These things can go bad pretty quick if they're not taken care of, so I made a pattern and got these situated. I hope you like this video. I'd like to thank the Leather Crafters and Saddlers Journal for sponsoring my channel. If you haven't checked them out online yet, I suggest doing so. They put on great shows, do a lot for the leather crafting community, set up instructors for classes. The trade show is a great place to get tools and everything else. And they also have competitions. You can see great work from artists all over the world. So if you haven't checked them out, I strongly suggest doing so. And when you subscribe to their magazine, in the promotional code, if you put my initials TAB, you'll get an extra issue. All right, I'm using, it's probably a 9-ounce. And I cut the pattern out just a little bit bigger than the lines themselves, taped it down. That way I can cut everything out right on the line after all the holes are punched and everything on the inside is cut out. Instead of using the pattern for the long straps, I used my strap cutter and cut out a couple real long straps. And then I'll just use that pattern to mark where I need all the holes and things. So what I'm going to do is cut out all these inner holes, use hole punches on all these inner corners, just a small hole punch. I find it's a little bit more durable than if I was to cut to a sharp corner with my utility knife. And if you cut past it with your utility knife, it just gives it a spot for it to tear. So I like to do hole punches. I'm not worried about these looking as pretty as I can. I want them to last and be as useful as possible. So for all these inner radiuses on these parts, I just grabbed a 3/32 inch hole punch. You don't want to go too big. So I'll do that to all these inner holes. And you can go a little bit bigger for the lacing holes if you want, but this one works just fine for those size holes. I just wouldn't go too big on those. And these little holes here in between the slits, just to keep it from tearing, I just use a little hole punch. This is a 1/16. So I'll punch those holes out. And then basically what I'm doing is connecting these holes with my utility knife. And I'll come close to that next hole, but I won't cut all the way to it, because then you're going to pass it and cut into the leather on the opposite side. I'll flip it around, then meet that cut. And if it's a little bit off, I'm not worried about it. As I try to pull that chunk out, I'll see where it needs to be trimmed. You can go from underneath or just touch it up a little bit. And for these ones, it's the same thing. We're just going to follow that line and connect these holes. But I'm going to stop short and then come from the other side to get that slit cut. So I'm going to go through, cut all this stuff out, and then I'll pop back on when I'm cutting the parts out from here. So I'm not worried about making these look as pretty as possible, because they are really going to get beat up on. You're going to want to seal them with wax or snow seal or something as well. Acrylic resin works okay. You're going to want to oil them, but the best is to impregnate them with some wax. What you can do is heat it up in the oven and then brush it on these parts. If you heat these parts up too much, the leather will start to get hard. The polymers in the leather will actually melt like a plastic and harden, which is good if you're making armor plating or something with leather. But you want these to stay soft so they don't get brittle from repeated bending and things. So you can see it didn't quite match up. So I can try to fix it right now, or I can wait and come in and just trim it up if I want after the fact. from one side, flip it around, starting that hole we punched, and get the other side. If you feel it sticking there, don't rip it out, try to cut it out. It doesn't need to be real pretty, but you could rip some flesh a little bit too much if you're farting around with it. Okay, I got everything cut out there. And if you want more tips and things, my other videos do have quite a bit of tips in them and stuff. You know what, this is getting dull. Even the tip is having a nice sharp knife, because you don't want to have to force anything. You want the blade to do the work. So some of these holes might have been a little cleaner if I replaced my blades sooner. But like I said, these are more of a utilitarian, so I'm not too concerned. I'm just kind of going quick here. Just cut right out. Cut these parts out right on the line. When you're coming around a corner like this, I find planting your middle finger down, keeping this knife straight up and down, and kind of press with that middle finger as you're coming around the corner instead of pulling with your whole arm, because then you could slip and pull and cut too far. These parts are a mirror image exactly, so it doesn't matter right or left. If you prefer the buckle be on the outside of your foot, you will have to come through the opposite side with the strap, though. That's about it. There's one. Make sure your hands are behind the blade, never cut towards your hand or anything. So with these it isn't as important because they don't need to look pretty, but when you get something hanging there, with most stuff you want to come back and cut it so you don't rip it, make it look weird. So what I did is I put a piece of tape all the way across the front of this. It just helps keep the paper from ripping and getting all distorted, and it'll help this hole punch pop back out a little bit easier. So I'm just going to cut this out so I can hold it on here as I punch these holes. Since this is the billet end, you do want to taper this. The curve that's in the pattern is enough. If you want to just go off of that, I usually just eyeball it. For this pattern anyways, just to get a taper going. It makes it easier to get it through the buckle. And I'll just lay this on the end here. You can do this first hole if you want, but I just start on the second one. See, the paper doesn't get all tore up as much because of the tape on there. The other thing is too, before you pull that out, if you need to move it, just use that. Everything will stay aligned. Move it to the other side. Now if you're cutting these out like you did the rest of the pattern, if you're not using a strap cutter, you'll tape them down like the other one was. You're going to punch these holes out first and then cut the strips out. For the buckle end I did the same thing. Piece of tape across there. And you can leave this side square, but I'm going to taper it off a little bit. Now you'll want to make sure you check the size of hole you want for the rivets you're going to be using before you punch the rivet holes. And then these center two holes is for the buckle, so we're going to cut that out. And it's always better to turn your knife inward a little bit instead of outward. If you come outward, it's going to be all messed up, but if you come inward on accident, you can fix that. You can trim that little bit out of there. So if I'm not exactly sure where the line is, I'll just turn my knife inward towards the center as I'm cutting these. And you can put some glue in there if you want. I usually do. You're going to want to make sure your buckle's facing the right way. can spray a little water on there if you want to get that bend in there real well. I just have two domed setters, and a little anvil and this little setter here. They're both domed. If you're real worried about them popping out, you can put a little 2-part epoxy in there or something. Get them good and set. That'll work good. Make sure you're grabbing a good piece of leather. If you get a piece cut from the belly, it's going to be too stretchy. You want to try to cut this more from the back, the shoulder area, or the butt. Stay away from the belly though. So I'm going to do the other one, and then I'll show you how to attach these. Get your shoe set up. You can see flesh side. You can see how it's going to hold the boot. So you're going to want flesh side up, and you're going to come through with all the flesh side up. Come through this side of this. Pull that down to about there. And this is going to come through this one. Up, back in, and out again. So it looks like that so far. Then you're going to come over the top, and again you'll want to look at the spacing on this. You're going to want to see the spacing and find those two. So you got 1, 2, 1, 2. And it's twisted around a little bit, but you still want to center it as much as possible. Coming through, but you want this on the inside underneath. Coming through like that. Nice and snug. You're going to come back out this hole and from underneath and up. And then you're going to go through this hole again. And then out and in these two. You come out that one, back into this one, and you can see when this is closed. And actually, let's put this lace on here quick, just a leather shoelace. You can use whatever laces you want. And if you go with leather, you're going to want to probably get this good and waxed as well. And I'm going to wax probably one of these and do like a snow seal or something else just to see how they age in relation. See how much I got to reapply depending on which sealant I'm using. See how that's going to hold the boot right there. So this is going to come around. It's going to be the grain sides up. Like that. So then this strap will ride more on top of the boot a little bit more. There's some extra holes, so you can trim this if you want. I like to leave it just in case I put on bigger boots or if you have somebody bigger using this. Like that. So if you have to tighten this quite a bit for a smaller boot, you're going to just tuck that slack in right here. Keep it out of the way.